season awards now has kind of been Cade Cunningham will be eligible for NBA awards after the NBA and union agreed both would be allowed to bypass the 65 threshold for eligibility. While Luka and Cade had the rule waived, Anthony Edwards filed a petition to an arbitrator to become eligible himself and was denied. Edwards' agent released the following statement about that decision. He said, quote, "For me personally, I'm a bit confused at the clemency for Cade, who missed time for something that happened on the court, and not Ant, who missed time for an infection. But ultimately, you already know Ant isn't tripping over it at all. He was mad he didn't get to 65, but not because he missed out on awards. He was mad because it meant he didn't get to play in all 82, which is what he always tries to do for his teammates and his fans. You know, the only thing he wants is a ring," end quote. So is the decision that was handed down by Luka for Luka and Cade, and now ultimately Anthony Edwards, is it fair, Stephen A?
I think it's fair, me personally. And let me say this about Ant-Man and stuff like that. That's not the only thing he wants. Ant-Man's coming for it all. He wants a league MVP. He wants championships. He wants it all. And damn it, he's going to deserve it because he's one of my favorite top 2 players to watch. I love him to death. I just truly do. Having said that, here's what I love about it, Big Perk. Cade Cunningham had the partially collapsed lung. Mm-hmm. All right? Luka Doncic, clearly the hamstring injury is something that has plagued him. We know it's not. It's a legit injury. I love the fact that this has been probed, that it was looked into, and the NBA made alterations to it. That's what I love. I think in concert with the Players Association, if I remember correctly. My point is, those things are important. Rather than having hard and fast rules that you can't modify under any circumstances, I like the fact that, you know what, you can look at the situation and say, listen, the reason that the original rule was put into place to begin with is because of load management, how it was being abused, and how dudes weren't prioritizing fulfilling their responsibility, and teams weren't prioritizing fulfilling their responsibility for players to be available out on the court playing. But when you can't help it because of a legitimate injury, I don't really have a problem with them looking at those circumstances and saying, hey, you know what, we don't mind. And in the Luka Doncic case, I think there was a game or two that he missed because he went to see, to witness the birth of his child. And obviously the Lakers were fine with that. The league was fine with that. Stuff like that are obviously mitigating circumstances. I don't have any problem with that. I like the fact that they're open-minded enough to make adjustments, but still there's a hard and fast rule. There's a hard rule in place, rather, that says, excuse me, this is not what we're trying to give you credit for. I like that.
This rule is not going to work. And y'all know how I feel about Adam Silver. Like, I got great love, great appreciation for him, but it is unfair. Like, the Luka part, going to the birth of, your child, I understand that. The Cade part of it, they said it was a non-basketball related injury. It happened on the floor.
It happened on the floor, yeah.
It happened on the floor. So if you're Anthony Edwards, you hotter than fish grease right now. Because you're saying, hold on, so you're going to grant him and tell Cade he's eligible, but in the same breath tell me I'm not? That's not okay. And it's bigger than just Anthony Edwards playing 82 games or him coming for it all. When they talk, look, when this rule is in place and you see guys like this, they going to appeal it and stuff, it's not about the MVP. It's not about Defensive Player of the Year. It's about the all-NBA teams. You know why? Because it affects their lettuce, their bread. And so when I'm looking at it and I'm saying, well, you can't do Anthony Edwards like this and you grant Cade Cunningham, it's just unfair. And this rule.
The NBA just made a decision that has Kendrick Perkins furious. Luka Doncic and Cade Cunningham are now eligible for end-of-season awards despite not playing 65 games. Anthony Edwards filed the same petition. He was denied. Perkins said, "That's straight favoritism. If you're Anthony Edwards, you're hotter than fish grease right now." Let me break down exactly what happened and why this is such a problem. First, the facts. Luka Doncic played 64 games. He missed 2 games in December for the birth of his daughter in Slovenia. Cade Cunningham played 63 games. He suffered a collapsed lung in mid-March that happened on the court. Both filed extraordinary circumstances challenges. Both were approved. Anthony Edwards played 61 games. He missed time with a staph infection in December. He filed a petition. It went to an independent arbitrator. He was denied. Anthony Edwards' agent, Justin Holland, released a statement. He said, "For me personally, I'm a bit confused at the clemency for Cade who missed time for something that happened on the court and who missed time for an infection. But ultimately, You already know and isn't tripping over it at all. He was mad he didn't get to 65, but not because he missed out on awards. He was mad because it meant he didn't get to play in all 82, which is what he always tries to do for his teammates and his fans. The only thing he wants is a ring. Stephen A. Smith started the debate. He said he thinks it's fair. He said Cade had a Part 1. Ally collapsed lung. Luka had a legitimate hamstring injury and missed games for the birth of his child. He likes the fact that the NBA looked at the circumstances and made adjustments. He said the original rule was put in place because of load management being abused. But when you can't help it because of a legitimate injury, he doesn't have a problem with exceptions. Then Perk fired back. He said, "This rule is not going to work. I got great love and appreciation for Adam Silver, but it is unfair." He pointed out that Cade's injury happened on the floor. It happened on the basketball court. So if you're Anthony Edwards, you're hotter than fish grease right now. You're saying, hold on. You're going to ground him and tell Cade is eligible, but in the same breath tell me I'm not. That's not okay. Perk then explained why this is about more than just MVP. He said, it's about the All-NBA teams. You know why? Because it affects their lettuce. Their bread. He's talking about money. Making All-NBA triggers Supermax contract extensions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. For Anthony Edwards, he's eligible for a 4-year, $300 million Supermax extension in 2027, but he needs to make an All-NBA team either this year or next year. This year is now out of the equation. So he has to make it next year. That's a lot of pressure. Stephen A. conceded the point. He said, Anthony Edwards deserves to be eligible as well based on this. But then he tried to find a difference. He said, Luka and Cade were 1 game away, while Anthony Edwards was 4 games away. He said that's not a huge difference, but it is some difference. Perk wasn't having it. He said, they're saying Cade's injury was non-basketball related. That doesn't make any sense when we saw it happen on the basketball court. It was during a game. He was going for a loose ball and collided with an opponent. In Ant-Man's case, he was ill. You can sit there and say that's a non-court issue when it clearly was, and that's your excuse for making modifications, but you don't do that with Ant-Man. That doesn't make sense. Shay, the host, tried to play devil's advocate. She said maybe the difference is that Luka and Cade were 1 game short while Edwards was 4 games short. But she agreed with Perk that the precedent has been set. The 65-game rule might not carry the same weight anymore. Stephen A. then made a broader point about who should be making these decisions. He said, I can't trust the players to be objective because the objectivity ain't there. You're always going to ride with your peeps. That's not our job, but that's theirs. Somebody got to look at it objectively and say, this ain't about feelings. This is about facts. Then Trick Williams, the guest, jumped in. He said, I hear Stephen A. say it ain't about feelings, it's about facts. But come on, man. Luka Doncic. Let's have some mercy on the brother. Anything we can do to get the Lakers rolling, that means Luka can get an award. Let's give him an award. Let's at least put him in the bid. Perk laughed and said, it's about fandom. Look at you, Trick. Let me give you my take on this. The 65-game rule was created for a good reason. Load management was out of control. Fans were paying hundreds of dollars to see stars sit in street clothes. But the rule was never meant to punish players for legitimate injuries or for being present for the birth of their child. So exceptions make sense. But here's the problem. The exceptions need to be consistent. Cade Cunningham's collapsed lung happened on the court. That's a basketball injury. If you're going to call that non-basketball related to grant him an exception, you're twisting the definition. And if you're going to deny Anthony Edwards for a staph infection that kept him off the court, you're drawing an arbitrary line. Where is the consistency? Where is the fairness? And Perk is right about the money. This isn't about MVP trophies. It's about Supermax contracts. It's about hundreds of millions of dollars. When you make a decision that affects whether a player can earn $300 million, you better have a clear, consistent, transparent process. The NBA does not have that right now. The solution is simple. Either enforce the 65-game rule strictly with no exceptions, or spell out exactly what counts as an extraordinary circumstance before the season starts. The birth of a child? Yes. A collapsed lung? Yes. A staph infection? Apparently not. But why not? Beck. Or it wasn't severe enough? Because it didn't happen on the court? The line needs to be clear. Otherwise, every year we are going to have appeals. Every year someone is going to feel cheated. And every year we are going to be having this same debate. All right, let me wrap this up with some questions for you. Drop your takes in the comments. 1. Should Anthony Edwards have been granted the same exception as Luka and Cade? 2. Is Perk right that this is straight favoritism toward the Lakers and bigger markets? 3. Should the NBA scrap the 65-game rule entirely, enforce it strictly, or keep the appeals process? 4. Does making all NBA teams affect how we judge a player's legacy? I'll read the best comments in the next video. Smash like if you agree with Perk. Hit subscribe if you think the NBA made the right call. And comment your All-NBA predictions right now. Let's go.